I'm trying to find where, yo, we got Nietzsche, we got Hemingway, we got Hunter S. Thompson. I'm trying to find. We're just gonna keep. I do not do programming. The joke is that people with programming stocks are trans. They're calling me trans. We haven't seen a Japanese book yet. No Japanese book yet. This is a good book, Nixonland by Pearlstein. All of this is like by far like the most definitive overlook of the 60s that you can find of 60s culture, politics, good shit, good shit. There, I was talking about Remember the Kanji earlier. The Poems of Mao Zedong. This book on addiction is terrible, by the way. I read this because it was on a list from Arrowwood's library, and he uses a fuck ton of studies that have never been replicated. Like, for example, there's a study that I fucking hate this book. There's a study that he uses to say that addiction is all psychological, that specifically uses a breed of mice that are genetically predisposed to not being addicted as easily. And every time people have tried to replicate the study, it's never gone through. This is a pretty bad book, but I read it anyway because I wanted to. I don't know. I wanted to know about addiction. Serotonin by Holobeck. This is a good. Hitler is the Iliad by Homer. Hitler is military commander. Theodore Kaczynski, Industrial Society and Its Future. Book about Iran. Philip K. Dick, my favorite author besides Bukowski, right here. Yeah, big book about Pol Pot, a biography of Karl Marx. Where's Mein Kampf? I don't have Mein Kampf. A book about ecstasy. Alexander and Anne Shulgin, two books where they talk about all of the compounds that they synthesized and the reports of them. Mass Psychology of Fascism, Mao the Unknown Story. The two volumes of Male Fantasies where this sexologist tries to say that like fascism was caused by sexual repression. The Long March. Another book about bad stuff Mao did. Private Life of Chairman Mao, his fucking personal doctor writing about the man himself. Shutting Out the Sun, book about hikikomori. Apocalypse Culture. This is just a bunch of esoteric essays, like political and cultural essays. Inventing the Future, it's a book about UBI. It must be annoying to carry around these books when changing addresses. Oh yeah, moving here was insane with all of this. We got some Freud here, a history of drugs in Nazi Germany, and Manual for Organic Chemistry, campaign. This is a book about Upton Sinclair when he ran for governor of California as a socialist. Almost at work, so gonna leave. Goodbye, old friend. Let's catch up soon. I'd appreciate that. Yeah, no, it was nice having you here, drunk. Infinite Jest. I only made it like halfway through this because it's so long. It's a really fucking good book though. Organic Chemistry as a Second Language, Introducing the Basic Concepts to Organic Chemistry 1, Chemistry Self-Teaching Guide, Total Synthesis 2, The Odyssey, Ulysses, What's the Matter with Kansas, The Occult Roots of Nazism. This is a cool overview of a lot of the like occult aesthetics and ideals that were incorporated into the ideology. Storming Heaven. This is a good book about the history of LSD. Inside Hitler's Greece. More James Joyce up here, another book about the history of LSD. This is a friend of Nietzsche, basically talking about their personal history with them. Wisdom of Insecurity by Alan Watts. Decent book. I mean, it's very flowery, like everything Watts wrote, but I mean, you read it and it's like you know what's gonna happen. He's gonna say desire is the root of all suffering and whatnot. Typical Buddhist stuff. We got more James Joyce here. Dubliners. I can tell you browse Lit. I mean, yeah, a lot of these recommendations I did get from Lit, but they're good recommendations. Quiet Prayer. When did I buy this? I don't even remember buying this. I Okay, I apparently I have a book I didn't know I had. LSD, My Problem Child, Albert Hoffman's biography of a guy who used to be a dope dealer. Escape from Rome. Perhaps the most comprehensive history on Rome you can find. I would recommend this. It talks about the economic and social factors. Strange Glow. This is a really, really good history of radiation, just the science of radiation, the discovery of it, its various uses. Very easy to understand for the layman, even though you do end up learning a lot of technical shit. The Shock Doctrine, The Fifth Sun, The Fifth Sun is kind of a revisionist history of the Aztecs. Thomas Paine and the Promise of America, basically just a biography of that guy. Revolutionary Iran, another book on Iranian history. Stalin and Power. Robert C. Tucker, he does some of the more comprehensive and I would say historically accurate portrayals of Stalin while he doesn't, kind of glorify him or anything like that. a lot of the propaganda surrounding the Stalin years is dispelled here, while at the same time talking about the crimes. Permanent Record by Snowden, good. Faust, obviously a classic. 120 Days of Sodom, classic, obviously. Let's see here. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with lit. There's a lot of lit hate in the chat. The Myth of Sisyphus by Camus, Emile Durkheim's Division of Labor and Society, The Great Wall of China by Kafka. Underrated short story by Kafka. Not very many people talk about this one. I pretty much never hear it brought up. Communist Manifesto, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Taipei by Tao Lin. I do not like Tao Lin. I think he's incredibly boring as a writer. I don't know why people are constantly shilling Tao Lin as like one of the better modern writers of today. I think he's fucking obnoxious. I mean, the guy literally released a book of his own tweets. No, I was just getting a vibe from the shelf, and now I understand why. No one is saying we dislike lit. It's just obvious many of these books are discussed a lot there. The last book I read was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The Moe Manifesto, more Ernest Hemingway. The Man in the Sea is a really, really good book. If you want like something short that's kind of slice of lifey about an old guy kind of mentoring this kid, this is good shit. The Three Christs of Ypsilanti. I never know how to pronounce this word. This is a good book about the story of or the history of various mental institutions and experiments thereof. Catch-22, obvious postmodern literature classic. The Trial, classic. Cordian. The Anatomy of Dependence. This is one of those books on Japanese psychology that kind of ended up underpinning like the whole field. Like every Japanese psychologist is going to read this. This is, if you want like a comprehensive analysis of this sort of mother-child dynamic, the unique relationship Japanese children have to their parents and its effects on society, this is an important book to read. North Korea, Another Country, good book on North Korean history. Finally, some good news. This is an indie book that I don't really hear anyone talk about people hanging out in the wake of a nuclear bombing. The Selfish Gene by Dawkins, The Pigeon by Suskind. The Pigeon is an amazing short story. It's very Kafka-esque, but it's basically a psychological horror story of a guy who is tortured by a pigeon, by the sight of a pigeon around his dwelling. Extremely isolated guy who lives like in a tiny room, and the whole story is him in a sort of stream of consciousness way going fucking nuts. Really, really good. American Power and the New Mandarins by Noam Chomsky. It's just an essay, it's essays that he wrote. Julius Caesar by Shakespeare. It's Shakespeare. Hamlet by Shakespeare. Why Women Had Better Sex Under Socialism. Socialist book. This is a bunch of stuff from Plato. Manufacturing Consent. How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. This is kind of the book that ushered in the psychedelic renaissance in the United States, because there was all of this research being done that found that LSD, psilocybin, would be good for like neurodegenerative diseases and depression due to like neurogenesis, spinogenesis, synaptogenesis and such. And this is part of why they have such a rapid therapeutic effect in a clinical context. And so it took this guy who's a botanist as well as like a neuroscientist who had not used, these drugs until well into his life. Like I think the first trip he had, he was in his 50s, established academic guy, sort of putting all of this research together in this digestible form for the public that ended up completely changing the conversation around psychedelics in the United States. So How to Change Your Mind is, it's an important book culturally, I guess, for this country. How to Read and Why by Harold Bloom, esteemed literary critic. You'll notice this, I have a couple of these books that are like how to read more efficiently. It's because I'm autistic about getting the most out of what I read. Red Star Over China by Edgar Snow, kind of a biased book. I mean, he was a communist who was in China as the revolution was happening, but I mean, nonetheless, I think important to read. Notes on Nationalism by George Orwell. Day by Elie Wiesel. The Great Gatsby. Night. The Wall by Sartre. The Soviet Political Mind by Tucker. Another book from him. 1984. The Thornbirds of Mice and Men. The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness. This is one of those Frankfurt School books that, goes over the psychology of fascism. I've got a couple like this. Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail. More Hunter S. Thompson. Nietzsche, The Gay Science. Ketamine. This is literally just a book of studies about ketamine. I think it's from like the MIT Press or something. The Stranger by Albert Camus, one of my favorite books. My Education Mutation by Burroughs. This is literally just a series of Burroughs' dreams that he wrote about. It's kind of an esoteric book. I believe this was the last he ever wrote as well. Darkness at Noon, great book about authoritarianism in the Soviet Union. Too Loud a Solitude. I did a reading of the first 2 chapters of this on my second channel. Very, very flowery language in this book. It could be exhaustive for some to read, but I like it because of how dense it is, even though it deals with fairly mundane topics. Junkie by William Burroughs. This is one of his more well-known books, along with Naked Lunch. After Prohibition, this is just a series of essays on how we would go about the legalization of drugs. Bunch of different perspectives that are in this book. The Triflers by Mumkey Jones. Surprisingly good book for an amateur author. I remember enjoying it. Against Empathy, The Case for Rational Compassion. I have not read this one yet. The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, antinatalist book that Noah was constantly shilling. The Grapes of Wrath, classic from the Great Depression. This is one of those books they make you read in school, which is weird because it has a socialist message, and Steinbeck himself was a communist. On Both Sides of the Wall, interesting anecdotes from people who were in Jewish concentration camps and slums during World War II. Killing Pablo. I have not read this one yet either. It's the story of Pablo Escobar, how they got him. Synthetic Panics. This is a really, really good cultural and political analysis of the prohibition of drugs, its racial component, its historical and political component, and specifically as it pertains to synthetic drugs. There's a lot of data from this book that I've cited, and so it's been essential to me in that sense. The Assassination of Julius Caesar by Michael Parenti. This is, I think I had another one of Parenti's books here. I think I showed God and His Demons. This is more of like a socialistic analysis of Caesar's role and of Rome in general. A People's History of the United States. Good Cop, Bad War by Neil Woods. Basically an analysis from the perspective of a former undercover cop on the prohibition of drugs and how it actually leads to the increase of crime and violence in society. This book as well is just sort of a companion piece. Woman in the Dunes by Abe. This is a Japanese book. Post Office by Charles Bukowski. I've said many times Bukowski is my favorite writer. If you've read him, you can probably see how I've been influenced by him. Moby Dick, one of the best books. Leeches. This is kind of a weird book. This book, Leeches, is cool because it's basically just the schizo ramblings of a writer character who's a Jew in the middle of, I almost said Serbia. Cool. The Drug User, various essays and stories of people who have used drugs throughout history. The Little Book of Heroin. This is just a guide by a PhD, I think, is he psychologist, on how to do heroin. Imperialism, The Highest Stage of Capitalism by Lenin. The Boy Who Could Change the World. This is literally just a bunch of essays by Aaron Schwartz. The Hour of the Star, a stream of consciousness schizo book about a guy who's a writer. The Rebel. This is another Camus book. Chess Story. It's a decent short story. First is Tragedy, then is Farce. Zizek, Women, my favorite book by Bukowski. Oh, Murakami. We got another Japanese book here. A Wild Sheep Chase. Confederacy of Dunces. Brief Interviews with Hideous Men by David Foster Wallace. I like this one more than Infinite Jest. The Confessions of Victor X. This is like a pedo book, basically. It's basically just the story of a pedo and his life being like an impoverished pervert. Supposedly, the story of this guy is what Narbekov's Lolita, which I also have on this shelf somewhere, is about. It's based on this guy. I am going to go back and read the older messages in chat. Beautiful Fighting Girl, another Pol Pot book, Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose, Man and His Symbols by Jung. Almost finished here. We've got more Kurt Van Gut. We've got Thoreau in here, Techniques in Organic Chemistry. We've got some Ray Bradbury here, Hikikomori, Adolescence Without End. More Philip K. Dick, The Crying of Lot 49, The Bell Jar, Virginia Woolf, Of Love and Other Demons. This is like a semi-pedo book, depending on how you look at it. Not really, though. Steppenwolf, obvious classic. The Life of Lenin, the Jakarta Method. This is a great analysis of how essentially the coup that we did in the Philippines ended up being used as a model for Pinochet's Chile and other countries around the world which turned the tide of the Cold War. Christopher Hitchens, more Albert Camus, The Tibetan Book of the Dead, Sadie Plant's Writing on Drugs, The Song of Solomon, pretty important work of African American literature. The Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley, stories of his experiences on mescaline and psilocybin. A High Wind in Jamaica, fantastic book about child pirates. The Book of Disquiet, kind of one of those, important nihilist doomer core books. Foucault's The Order of Things. Ice by Anna Kavan. I did not finish this book. I thought it was really boring. Just have programming and Japanese stuff. Oh yes, Silence by Shosaku Endo. If any of you have seen the Scorsese movie, it was based off of this book. The Road to Terror, another book about Stalin. Practical Ethics by Peter Singer. Hitler by Werner Maser. Let's see, Soviet Fates and Lost Alternatives. The President's Club. Life and Terror in Stalin's Russia. The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, another book about the history of LSD in the States. The Wealth of Nations. Notes from Underground. Lolita. Speed and Kentucky Ham by Burroughs' son. And Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. I mean, there's also this book right here. It's just a theology thing. Yeah, I'm not going to go to my room to get the books that I have in there. I guess that's my shelf. Did I not say Indonesia? I said the coup in Indonesia was used as a model for Pinochet's Chile. Okay, time to read the chat. Reading books is fun, but it can get expensive, and reading online doesn't feel right. No, it really doesn't feel right when you read online, does it? Like, the sense of progression I get from turning a page, and having it in my hands, it's really incomparable. I don't know why. See, I don't know why they don't make us, like, when you're in high school. This is a college chemistry book, by the way. But I don't know why they don't make you read this in high school, because it makes all of the concepts way more intuitive. How much longer are you going to be free? I'm not moving until the 20th. I leave the state the 20th. But, like, it literally starts from the very beginning in a way that I found to be more intuitive than high school chemistry material. Like it literally starts with matter. The universe is composed of matter and radiant energy. Matter, from the Latin materia, meaning wood or other material, may be defined as any kind of mass energy that moves with velocities less than the velocity of light, and radiant energy as any kind of mass energy that moves with the velocity of light. Like, I feel like there was way more obfuscation in high school chemistry than there is when you look at a college level book like this. If I don't know what something means when I'm reading this, all I have to do is look it up, and then the meaning is right there. But, like, they make everything so abundantly clear that it makes me almost think that there's, like, a conspiracy in high school chemistry class to obfuscate it, to make it less understandable.